Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. Thanks for joining us, however you found us on CHCH Podcast. I'm Louie Butko, and on today's show, I'm very pleased to be joined by the City Manager for the City of Hamilton, Marnie Cluckie. Marnie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here because it has been just over a year since you've taken on the role of City Manager. First of all, what is a city manager? What do you do?
Always a good question. The role of the city manager essentially is to make sure that everything in the city runs smoothly. So whether that's clearing roads or making sure that parks are accessible or that there's programming and recreation, all of those things fall under my responsibility. Mm-hmm. So my goal is to make sure that we have a safe and efficiently run city. I am the only employee of the mayor and council, and all of the 8,000 plus employees report to me, but we have to make sure that things run well for the Hamiltonians.
Okay. So you were selected by the mayor using her strong mayor powers. Obviously, she did a far and wide search. Your experience speaks for itself. But obviously with that comes the talking point for critics that you're just the mayor's lackey to some extent. How would you respond to a criticism like that?
Well, actually, it was still a robust recruitment process. So it was multi-stages, and the mayor was one of many panelists that included council members and the community, which is actually my preference so that you don't have that negative perception potentially. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you've come by it because of your experience, because everyone feels that you're the right fit.
And like I said, you definitely have the experience. You spent more than a decade, or just about a decade, working for the city of Hamilton in various roles. You went to a couple of different municipalities after that. But what about your experience here in Hamilton drew you back to working for the city? You knew how it worked. You saw how the sausage got made, and you still wanted to come back. What was it about that you wanted to still be a part of the future of this city?
Well, I love Hamilton, and anyone who lives in Hamilton knows that Hamiltonians love Hamilton. I had been born and raised in Hamilton, and I went to elementary and part of high school in Hamilton, and I had worked for the city before, so I wanted to return to my hometown and make a difference where I lived, and I also knew that Hamiltonians, both the people who live in Hamilton and the people who work for the city of Hamilton, are a passionate group of people who are honest and dedicated and hardworking. And so I wanted to be a part of that again.
So overseeing 8,000 city workers, you mentioned all the things that you are responsible for, and a lot of them have become contentious issues. You mentioned parks, keeping parks safe. There have been encampment policies. So when it comes to the city manager's role and what's presented at council, how do those two things correlate? How do they sometimes go head to head?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, I can't be involved in all things when we have a city of over 500,000 people and over 8,000 employees. But I try to make sure that I'm following through on council's priorities and directions, and that I'm inspiring a broader team to deliver on those priorities. So for the critical items, I will review. And I try to empower the staff, though, to make the decisions that are value-based and representative of what the community wants.
So just breaking down, again, your role, because I think, people might listen to this and hear city manager, they might hear us talk about council. But just to put it into perspective, city council are debating something in a meeting. Somebody makes a proposal. Oftentimes we hear, let's refer it to city staff. That's where it slides sort of under your purview, right?
That's exactly right. So staff are the technical experts, the people that implement the direction of council. So council hears from their constituents, figures out what the community needs most, and then they govern. So they set the policy, they help to establish the vision of the city. And then staff have to roll it out. And so we do our level best to do that. And as you can imagine, sometimes there's competing priorities, whether that be resources, funding, or just things that are in conflict. Time, all of those things have to be balanced. So it's a balancing act.
I was about to say time, like sometimes the city staff report can come back in X number of months or X number of weeks. Is that sort of, it's the big picture of what goes on at our city, right? And I guess, how do you prioritize things like that? Is it things council feels more strongly? Is it things the mayor is feeling more strongly? How do you prioritize prioritize a city of 500,000 that encompasses so much?
It's all those things. So, of course, we prioritize the priorities of council. We also have to prioritize things like health and safety. So if there's a community risk for something, then of course we want to take care of that right away. We want people to be living in a healthy and safe environment. There's some legislative requirements that we're balancing. And then there's the things that we know that are most important to the community. So all of those things have to be taken into consideration.
Let's talk about your previous experience. You were the CAO of the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, and you got there at a very, very interesting time, that being December 2019, COVID just about to really expand. How did you embrace that challenge of coming into a new township in a big role as head of as the CAO, and what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I think all of us learned so much from the pandemic. It was a crisis that hit worldwide, and so much learning. It was an interesting time to start an organization, even just, as you can imagine, meeting your colleagues and not actually being able to see them because you're removed from them. I hadn't had the luxury of meeting them in person, so I had to find ways to communicate and ways to engage that were different. So I did a lot through video with staff and making sure that we held town halls, doing the same thing for the community so the community could see me and build that trusting relationship, making sure that you had the ability to hear what people had to say, and try to advance initiatives while still making sure that you're managing a crisis. So very interesting time, but I would say, like many, it taught me resilience, it taught me different ways of communicating, and it helped me to be as adaptable as possible.
I mean, even the growth, obviously a much smaller township, that being a town on the lake, Niagara-on-the-Lake, but it is experiencing its own little boom right now, and the issues that are being debated there, obviously a little bit smaller than what's being debated at Hamilton City Council, but again, CAO, one of the top roles in the township, just like you have here. Let's talk about some of the issues in the town, in the city of Hamilton. Mayor Horvath this week is in Washington. Obviously, the tariffs this week went into effect. The impact of this will be felt severely on Hamiltonians. How are we bracing for that impact?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a scary time because Hamilton is identified by the chambers as being the 8th most vulnerable city in Canada as a result of this. Obviously, we have a strong steel background, a strong manufacturing background, and many jobs are positioned there. So it means that we have to show strength and leadership and really step up at a time like this. So some of the things that are happening, well, actually just yesterday, we held the mayor's tariff roundtable where we met with various community leaders in the manufacturing industry, other businesses, Chamber of Commerce, the airport, and the Port Authority to talk about what the potential impact of this is and what we can do. There's other things that we're doing at the city level in terms of finding ways to build into our procurement policy how we might buy local, how we might ensure that we're having Canadian preference, but certainly local preference to help build that strong economy. And the mayor is off right now actually advocating in Washington with the Great Lakes Cities Initiative about how important this is and how there's an impact not just on Canada, but the U.S. as well. So this is a negative for everyone.
What would you say to residents in Hamilton, small businesses in Hamilton that are worried that life's about to get much more expensive for them, that the profit margins they were making were just real tight to begin with, and they're worried? What would your message to them be?
Hang on, because what we do know about Hamiltonians is that we're strong and we're resilient, and we've made it through difficult times before. So all kinds of people from various areas are coming together. Different levels of government are joining together to advocate against this, and we will come through this. It is a scary time, but Hamiltonians always make it through.
Speaking of long-term, I want to go back to sort of the day-to-day role at the city. You have the city staff reports that you've been asked to put together, but you're also always looking towards the future and those strategic plans for 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. How do you balance those two things, worrying about the day-to-day, but also trying to see long-term about where you feel like the city can go?
Well, that's so critical, isn't it? Because we're not just planning for today, although that's important and there are imminent things that must be dealt with, but we want to make sure that we have a stable and long-term future for our kids and our kids' kids. And so that's critical in terms of having a thriving and prosperous community. So while we're dealing with the day-to-day items, we also are having a 10-year plan, and that reflects itself in the budget. It doesn't sound all that exciting, but where you put your money, where you put your resources, is the things that you're going to focus on long term. And I'm happy to say that Hamilton actually has a very strong financial standing. We have a AAA credit rating, which may not mean much, but that means that we have the highest credit rating that's possible for a municipality. And that means that we are planning for the long term, that we're planning for a sustainable future, and that we're putting money aside in reserves at the same time as we're investing money in the things that matter most to Hamiltonians.
Would that be similar to a personal high credit score? Are rates? Are you going to get better rates on things like that? There's a more tangible benefit to something like a AAA rating score?
That's exactly it. If you have a high credit rating, then you can borrow more when you need to for the right things, but it means that you've been managing your budget appropriately. And so that's what Hamilton's been doing too. We've been managing, although it's bigger, it's the same principle as your
just wanted to be sure. That's just a little fact. I just want to make sure for my own reasons. Let's talk again some more day-to-day issues. And this is one that I feel like we've been talking about for decades, but the LRT. Obviously, that's one of those topics that you can't really avoid. Where are we when it comes to the LRT?
That's a great question. So you'll remember back in November, there was an announcement that the request for qualification was going out, and we had a minister here for the visit. Basically, what that means is the scope of work in the first section of it was going out. Well, it actually just recently closed in the last couple of days, so it's being evaluated now. And so soon you'll see that first package of work awarded, which basically means the work that's associated with utilities, the engineering portion, all those site works, all those early day works. So we are seeing some movement, which is exciting.
All right, so some big long-term plans there. Let's talk more recently, and that being the significant weather event that hit Hamilton. Obviously, there were challenges with it. This is the biggest storm we had seen in quite some time. You had the combination of back-to-back days. How do you feel looking back on it now, being a few weeks with it, the significant weather event ended? How do you feel like the city responded?
Well, first, I just want to acknowledge the community for their patience. I know this was a difficult one. It's been a long time since we had an event like that. 10 years, actually, since we had that much significant snowfall. And this is one of the top events in the last 30 years as well for snowfall and just the length of time. So, and thank you to staff, because they really stepped up and worked around the clock, worked really hard. And they did a great job. I think there's also some lessons learned out of it, and that's important. And we always reflect after an event like this to see what we could do better, what we could do differently. And so recently we met and went through that. Some of the things that I think we need to look at is consolidated contracts to make sure that things are cleared at the appropriate times, right? Some folks would have seen what seemed odd in terms of maybe the roads weren't quite cleared, but then you saw a bike lane cleared, and that relates to just having different contracts for different things. So how can we streamline that? The other piece I think we could do better on is just communicating to the public. So while we put some information out, I think it would have helped if we had been more communicative all along the way. So I'm happy in terms of staff work so hard and we're so responsive. And if you compare us to similar municipalities, we actually had a pretty prompt response. But of course, there's always things we can learn from.
Some of the other kind of topics of the day. Mayor Horvath has made it clear in her role as mayor, she's willing to work with anybody. Premier Doug Ford was reelected in a recent election. How is Mayor Horvath's relationship with Premier Ford? How is the city's relationship with Premier Ford? And how do you look forward, moving forward, working with him again for another 4 years?
It's a very strong relationship. And I think when you're in a leadership role like the mayor, you have to spend a lot of time building those relationships because you don't do anything alone. I think that applies to all of us in some way or another. But certainly when you're dealing with other levels of government, you have to spend the time. You have to see where you align with the other levels of government and tell your story so that they know why they need to invest. Those relationships help make sure that we get funding and we get policy that helps advance Hamilton and make sure we get the attention that we deserve.
There still have been impacts on municipalities, though, on decisions that the province has made, downloading extensive costs, and that's been felt in the budget process. Going through the budget process this year seemed like it was a lot less more together, right? It seemed like there was less fighting. It seemed like it was done. It was put together. What was that process like, putting together the budget for a city this big? And what did you learn through these two budget processes that gives you confidence moving forward?
So this was a really strong budget process, I thought, and it's really an all hands on deck kind of thing. I always call budgeting a team sport, maybe for geeks like myself, but because it takes so many people to plan ahead, and so it crosses every department. It's not just finance putting together a budget. It's reaching out, understanding what the community needs and wants. It's having finance look at financing plans. It's looking at how to prioritize, because we also have to try and make it as affordable as possible for our residents and taxpayers. So it's quite a rigorous process. This year was a little different because of strong mayor powers. And so we had to make sure we followed that legislation. And so I think we've learned from that as well, and we'll be taking that back to help improve it next year also. As
we are joined here by Marnie Cluckie, the city manager for the city of Hamilton. You've been very generous in talking about different issues. This, of course, is one of the big ones, and that is the city's encampment policy. There have been changes. There have been requests to changes. It's still an open topic of conversation on council. I'm not sure how much you can get into, but the recent Tiffany Barton lands opening did take a little bit longer. But where are you right now with those lands?
Yeah, so the Barton and Tiffany site is progressing quite well. It's actually part of a broader plan for shelter space. So we had a direction and approval in September to move forward with it. And in 4 short months, by January, we had actually implemented 192 new shelter spaces. And then the additional 80 at Barton and Tiffany would bring us to 272 new spaces. Which was the first time in over a decade, maybe more, that we'd expanded at all, but certainly significantly. So that's an 80% increase. In terms of the site itself, well, as of Friday, we had 19 individuals of the potential 80 living there, and we had 5 pets as well. And I had the opportunity to speak to some of the residents who, one of them articulated to me that it saved their life because they'd had a triple heart bypass. And so being able to come here somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere that gave them dignity was really life-altering. So yes, it's a little delayed in terms of moving in everyone. We'd hope to have all 80 people there by the time the snow fell, and that's delayed. But certainly it's a good news story in the sense that we've got people living there now.
And I mean, those numbers that you mentioned, that helped bring the city's vacancy rate down to a new all-time low for city housing, right? The 2.2% number that's
for city housing.
Yeah, is that different? That's a little bit different, right?
That's a little bit different, yeah, in terms of the work that City Housing Hamilton did, because this is the emergency shelter capacity. Yeah. But what I'll tell you in terms of the impact when we're seeing it on encampments is our most recent report showed that there were 200 people in encampments, which was down from 300. So certainly we hope to see that so that there's no one living in encampments, but we are seeing that progress. And we're happy to see that progress because we want to balance that with making sure that parks are available to everyone.
When you look back on your first year and few months in the job, what are you most proud of?
There's so many things, and I have to say I'm more proud of others because the work I do is really overseeing the hard work that our staff does and that council does. So one of the easy ones is I'm delighted that we made it through the cyber attack, which hit just weeks into my my new tenure at the city. And why I'm so proud of it is because so many people banded together, collaborated, found solutions temporarily until we could start to build build back, and now we're building back better and stronger. So we're able, no one wants a cyber incident for sure, but I live by the rules and never let a good crisis go to waste. And we have this opportunity to build back in a stronger way, one that recognizes our residents, our business owners, and the things that Hamilton can be doing better. And so when we do that, as we build back, we're thinking about our customers. And every decision we make is rooted in how can we make this easier, better, more streamlined for our customers, which are our residents and businesses.
I know you're very busy, especially in a time like this. I know the mayor is in Washington, so I'm sure you got to be keeping tabs on what she's up to. So, Marnie, I really appreciate you making the time here today.
Thanks so much for your time. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. That's the best compliment a host can get. All right. I want to thank Marnie Cluckie for joining me today, and I want to thank you as well. Hey, and while you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss an episode of this show or any of the other great shows we have for you, including Sportsline with Bubba O'Neill. I want to thank Justin Peeler for directing today's show. And one more time, thank you from all of us here at CHCH. I'm Louie Butko. Have a great day.